This is the video that's going to talk about lesson 11.7. This topic for today is about nonlinear functions, which is different than everything that we've seen so far. In this chapter, everything has been about straight lines. There have been no curves, positive and negative lines. A vertical line, which is not shown here in green, is also a linear line or a linear equation, a linear function. Nonlinear functions are going to be shapes that are not straight. Anything that has a curve in it is considered nonlinear. Your learning target for today is considered that students will be able to write rules from words, tables, and graphs. So we're going to dive right in, going into the next section. This is asking you to make a table and a graph for the function y equals 2x squared minus 5. You're going to notice that there's a little 2 here on the x. This is different than what we have dealt with before. That means this is not a linear equation. Just a reminder that a linear equation is going to look in the form of y equaling mx plus b. Notice there's no exponent in behind that x. And so this one with a little 2 means that we're going to have a different type of graph. And that graph is actually called a parabola. And the equation is a quadratic equation. So we're going to look at some of the characteristics of that by creating a graph. And we're going to start by making a table. Okay. So as we look at our table, first we're going to do an x. And you're going to choose your x's based on whatever you would like to. You can choose any x you want. In the center of our table, we're actually going to do our calculating, and I'm going to show you how you're going to do that. And then the last part, you're going to put your y value, which is what the equation is equal to when you plug your x in. Whenever we're doing equations, a lot of times you're going to start with a couple of negatives. So I'm going to just start with -2, -1, and we're going to put a 0 in there for a neutral number. Use 1 and 2. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our 2 times that number squared, subtract 5, and we're going to put that in there. So that -2 takes the place of the x. And then we solve that. You do have to use the order of operations, which means you use the exponents first. So -2 squared becomes 4. 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 minus 5 is 3. And you're going to do it again. This time replacing with the -1. -1 squared is 1, times 2 is 2, minus 5 gives us a -3. Put the 0 in. Zero squared is 0, times 2 is 0, and we get -5. And now as we start putting this 1 in, you're going to see something that's kind of cool. If I put the 1 in, 1 squared is 1, times 2 ends up being 2 minus 5 is -3. Now you should be kind of thinking, I think there might be a pattern. If I plug that 2 in, 2 squared is 4, times 2 is 8, minus 5 is 3. As you start looking at that, you might see that we started to repeat. So 3 is over here, -3, -3, and -5 is the middle. This is actually going to be symmetric. So next, we are going to draw a line down, use our graph paper. You should be using graph paper right now. Sorry that my lines are not very straight. Use a straight edge to create that. Make sure you're following along the lines. And now you're going to graph these points. So we're going to graph -2, 3. So to the left 2 and up 3. We put our point right there. -1, -3, so -1 to the left, down 3 units. Remember, this is opposite than slope. We go left to right first, then up and down. 0, -5, 0, down 5. 1, -3, and 2, +3. And then you want to try to create a U shape as best you can. Making sure to put arrows on that. You should also mark off so that you know where these points are located. You want to make sure that you are giving your graph, meaning by putting numbers on it. And there's what our graph looks like. So that's what you're going to be doing today. You're going to be creating tables and graphs. So this is an example. This is another example of a function that is not linear. You're going to notice that in this one we have an s with just a no exponent, but we're actually dividing by that s. So we're going to make that table again. We're going to create our, in this case, an s. You could put x if you wanted to. Make it black again. So we've got s here. We're going to put what we're doing in the middle, so we know that what our equation is or what our function is. And then we're going to put our y's over here. Again, you can choose whatever you would like to. Since we're talking about speed and a trip, we're actually not going to be using negative amounts of time because it doesn't make sense. We don't go back in time and we don't make negative mile trips. So we're going to start by looking at different things that we could divide by 200. Think about this. Should I be dividing by 0? What does that mean? If I divide by 0, it's undefined. So 0 is not a good number to put in for s. 1 could be a good number. 2 could be a good number. 10 could be a good number. 20 could be a good number. 50 is another good number. And these are all things that you're going to want to be able to graph in a little while. So you want to make sure that they're numbers that you can graph. Maybe 50 might be a little bit high for us to graph right now. So maybe let's try using, what did I say? Do we put 10, 20, and maybe 25? So 200 divided by 1 is 200. 200 divided by 2 is 100. 200 divided by 10 is 20. 200 divided by 20 is 10. And 200 divided by 25 is 8. Again, you can make them anything that you want, but you do want to make sure that you are able to graph. Now, these are all, look at that lovely straight line. Sorry that it's not very straight. These are all numbers that I can graph, but I definitely want to make sure that I include 0, basically 0 to 25 on the S, which is my x-axis. This is going to be my speed down here. And then I've got distance here on the left on my y-axis. Now, speed, I need to go from 0 to 25. So I'm going to maybe go up by 5s. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. I did end up skipping a line. Make sure that when you do skip, you skip right from the beginning. Some of you like to graph and you put your line right there and then you'll skip 2. You can't do that. You've got to skip right away if you are going to skip lines. Now those lines still have meaning, so don't forget that they still have meaning here. This is actually 2.5 in between here. Then I've got to go all the way up to 200 in the next one. So I'm still going to skip lines just because I am drawing this graph on here, and it's not something that you can get a great look at if I cram all the numbers in. And I have to go from 0 to 200. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got about 9. So I'm actually going to go up by, let's do 25s. And then I'm going to graph my points. Now, 1, 200 is going to be closer here. And it's not perfect. It's just an estimate. 2, 100. Again, it's not exactly perfect, but you get the idea. The 1 is a little bit closer. 2 is there. 10 is at 20. 20 is at 10. And then 25 is at 8. And so what you see here is kind of a curve. It looks like this. You want to put arrows on both ends. Now you can make arrows look like that. This is again non-linear. This actually will never cross the x or the y-axis. It will get really, really close, but it'll never actually cross. The last example for today is writing a quadratic equation. Well, what that means is that you have to use x squared. So one of the things we know is that we have y equals, we have something with x squared. And we have to figure out, well, what do I do to this x after I square it that's going to give me this 7? So when I think about that, -3, I'm going to square it. What do I have to do to that that's going to make it equal 7? You can either multiply, you could add, there's a lot of different things that you can do to that. But as we start just looking at these, we're looking at either adding or subtracting or multiplying or dividing. So if I look at this, -3 squared is 9. Well, 9, what do I do to 9 that makes it 7? And some of you are saying, well, I bet you could subtract 2. So we're going to try that, x squared minus 2. Check to see, does that work for all of the other numbers? If I take -1 and I square it, if I do -2, do I get it to equal this -1? Well, -1 squared is 1, minus 2 is -1. If I put 0 in, 0 squared minus 2 does give me -2. 2 squared minus 2, 2 squared becomes 4, and 4 minus 2 is 2. So everything is good to go. We're going to try the 4. 4 squared is 16. 16 minus 2 is 14. So our equation is y equals x squared minus 2. So when they ask you to write a quadratic equation from a table, know that you are always starting with this x squared. Good luck on your assignment.